You can cut it, paste it, erase it. You can be the change if you make it. You can cook it, sew it, or fake it. If you're like-minded. Welcome to Like-Minded, where I conspire to inspire you. If you're feeling a little detached, you are in the right place. Because on this episode of Like-Minded, we are going to make some detachable collars. Just like on every episode of Like-Minded, before we create, we educate. We're all trying to figure out how to save time in our lives. And in 1827, that was also the case. Another accidental influencer was created. Hannah Montague started cutting off the collars of her husband's shirts in order to not have to wash and press the entire shirt. She was able to figure out how to wash and starch the collars so it could look fresh every time her husband put on his shirt. She caught the attention of her very first follower, Reverend Ebenezer Brown. He masterminded a way to turn it into a lucrative business, and millions of collars and cuffs were produced. Because of the sign of the times and it being a very classic time period, all of the collars and all the cuffs were white. I don't know about you, but I'm attached to getting detached. So let's go make some collars. As you know, all crafter class starts with a clean workspace. That's more like it. Here's literally a shining example of one of my favorite collars that I found, and it is my source of inspiration for today's crafter class. To glue or not to glue? That is the question. This is a collar that does not require sewing, but you can sew the edges if you like. My version is going to be with glue instead of thread. So let's get started. You're going to need paper, glue, a measuring tape, scissors, fabric of your choice, hook and eyes, and any kind of jewels or embellishments that you want to see on the collar itself. And of course, you need your stiff interfacing. If you think that you're going to be working with crystals and embellishments a lot, one of the tools that I find really helpful is the Crystal Ninja. It literally picks up the gems really easily, this rubber end here, and you can work really quickly with it instead of struggling. So I don't know about you, but if you're like-minded, I don't like to struggle. I'm ready to get started. Got my fabric, my scissors, my tape. I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, that's what I was looking for. A pencil. You're gonna need a pencil to draw your collar. We sometimes in life don't feel like we quite measure up, but I assure you, in this case, you will. First thing you want to do is measure your neck so that it's comfortable to go over a shirt collar. If you don't have a long enough piece of paper, you want to tape two pieces together to give you enough surface to draw your collar. My neck is 15.5 inches, so I'm going to transfer that measurement onto my paper, but I'm going to leave a little extra room because I know that my intention is to put this over an existing collar. You could cut the collar off your shirt, but why? It can go right over the top of a shirt that you have. I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch more to accommodate going over the top of your collar on your shirt. I'm going to mark it off at 16 just to give about a 1/2 inch room for this to go over the top of my existing collar on my shirt. I need to determine how tall I want my collar now, and so you can just measure your neck and how long. I have a long neck, so I can wear a taller collar than most people, but if you're not someone that has a long neck, you just want to measure that distance as well to see what's comfortable for you, how much drama you want to have. I like a tall collar, so I'm going to measure this one that I have that I like so much, and it's 2.5 inches in the back, and it's about 3¼ inches to 3.5 inches in the front. So I know that this is the maximum height that I want because that collar is pretty tall, and so it makes me stand up straight. So I don't want it any taller than that. Now don't be concerned if you're not good at drawing. I don't consider myself good at drawing, but I know that I can follow measurements as my guide. So if you have to take a few measurements to get yourself where you need to go, then do that. You can never have too many measurements. Next, you want to decide what shape of collar that you want to draw. Do you want it to be rounded? Do you want it to be square? How pointy do you want it? How long do you want those points to be? There's lots of things that you can be creative with in terms of the shape, and it's all up to you. It's all up to your personal style. I'm going to make a pointy one like the collar that I have been enjoying, but I might make a round one too while I'm at it. Next thing you want to do is find your halfway point. For me, it's 8 inches with my measurement, and it's the marker that's going to be for the back of the collar, which is shorter than the front of the collar. So I'm going to make the back of my collar height to be 2.5 inches. And so I'm going to mark that here. So I know how tall the back is. And so that's the length of the height of my back. So I'm going to consult my trusty favorite collar here just to demonstrate the shape of what it looks like when it's folded out. So when you're drawing your collar, there's a curve that needs to happen at the top part of your collar when you're drawing it, and a slight curve at the bottom that needs to happen when you're drawing. I swear to you that this pattern making process really is the longest part of this project. It's important to get it right because once you establish a good pattern, you can make multiple collars with that same pattern. So really take the time to get it right. Once you cut it out, you can make adjustments. If it's not fitting your neck right, you can make those adjustments on the paper itself before you cut your fabric. I've got my center measurement for my collar, which is the back of the collar. Now I want to get the end measurements, which is the front of the collar, which is, as a reminder, it's going to be the tallest part of your collar. So I'm going to set my measuring tape down, and I want my collar to be 4 inches. So I'm going to split the difference here, and I'm going to just mark 4 inches right here at the end, and 4 inches down at this end. Like that, so that we know. I find it helpful to draw arrows between my measurements, the center measurement and the two end measurements. It kind of gives me a guide of where I can freehand. And that's what I'm going to do. Don't be afraid to freehand. You can mess up, you can start again, it's just paper. So I'm just going to go like that, kind of give a nice slight kind of slope to it. And now I'm going to draw the bottom slope. It's okay to use short movements to get the shape that you want. It's really that simple, and if you really hate it, you can always start again. Keep trying till you get the shape that you like. I don't know if I'm going to like this, but I'm going to cut it out and I'm going to see. When I tell you to cut it out, I don't mean stop what you're doing. And that's what I got. You might want to do this step in front of the mirror because it's the only way to gauge if you did what you set out to do. Just like in life, we could all use some reinforcements now and again. And that is certainly true with this collar. So we're going to want to tape this to our interfacing all the way around, and then cut it out like we did initially with the pattern piece. Cutting it out just like we did when we cut the pattern piece out. We're going to cut through the interfacing and the pattern piece. Then you want to remove the pattern piece from the interfacing and set it aside. And that's what you should have. When it comes to choosing fabric, think about what type of collar you want to create. If I'm trying to create a collar that I'm going to embellish with gems or jewels, I'm going to want to choose a fabric like this, which is smoother and a little bit more sturdy. And this is a faux leather. It's beautiful by itself, but it can be really beautiful when you add things to it. If you want to create simply just a fabric collar, this is a beautiful velvet with some lame stripes built in, which I love. But whatever the fabric you choose, try and make sure that it has a vintage aesthetic, because in doing so, you're like-minded. I'm using my faux leather because I want to show you guys how to embellish. So it's really repeating the steps that we just did when we cut out the interfacing. We're going to use the interfacing now as our pattern. Or, I mean, you could really use the pattern piece too. We want to tape it down to our fabric and cut around just like we did before. Now we have it all taped down, and we're going to go ahead and cut it, but we're going to use our fabric scissors this time to cut a nice clean cut around. There's only one thing left to decide, and that is if you want to finish the inside of your collar as well as the outside. If you choose to do the inside, you want to cut an extra piece out of your fabric. I went ahead and cut another piece of my faux leather because in the end, I felt like it was going to look more finished and give my collar more stability. Our next step is to glue the inside of your fabric. I find that to be the easier surface to glue on. And then you're going to press the two together. Let it dry for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to bedazzle it. So on the next episode of When You Least Expect It, the bottom of my glue opened, and so I'm just going to use it out of the bottom with a toothpick. You want to make sure the edges are completely coated. It's the most important part of this project. If you want it all to stay together. One thing you want to keep in mind when gluing is to make sure you're using a glue that is fabric friendly. A fabric glue is usually the best choice, but a stronghold glue that says fabric on it will work just fine. Don't forget to put a little in the middle. You don't have to coat it completely in the middle, but just get a little in there. Then we want to press our two sections together, line it up. With this type of glue that I'm using, it's a little gorilla-ish, so there's a little playtime so I can move it around. Press it down really firmly, kind of smooth it out with the palm of your hands, and let it dry for about 15 minutes. After careful consideration, I've made my selections on which elements I want to use on my collar. I'm not going to embellish the whole thing like I originally thought with jewels. I'm just going to add a few of these little elements of light reflection into my collar. But I'm going to use these two trim choices to line my collar. And I'm going to glue that down with the same glue that I used before. I'm just gluing down my trim, my first trim, because I'm using two different types. Right on the bottom edge of our collar, press that in place. You want to cut your trim a little bit longer than you would think. You don't want to go right to the edge because you want to be able to fold it around to the back side, the opposite side. So I'm just going to cut it right about there. And then I'm going to glue it. When I glue it, I'm going to glue it on the other side like that. I'm going to repeat this process on the top edge as well. I often think that using upholstery fabrics and things that you would normally think of for furniture or household things are a better choice for this kind of a project because they're thicker and sturdier and can lend to the stability of the collar, and oftentimes you can find some pretty cool prints in that category of fabric. Again, we're going to trim a little bit further away from the edge so that we can wrap it around and disguise it so it looks finished. If you see any little areas that don't seem quite stuck down, you can take your toothpick and just run a little bit more glue along there. There. That's better. I'm just pressing down my edges to make sure that my trim is in nice contact with my collar, and it should look a little something like this if you're following along with my design, but feel free to use your imagination and create your own designs. So I've cut my trim at an angle so that I can place it to mimic the angle of the end of my collar, and I'm going to cut this to length and glue this in place. Before the glue dries from these two completely, I'm going to lift the end up and place this end piece in place on the top side. And I'm going to leave it out on the bottom side. Then we're going to glue this in place as well. Should look a little something like that. And repeat for the other side. I've cut my angle to mimic the point of my collar, and I'm just measuring the length that I will cut off. We have our piece, and we'll do exactly as we did on this side. Lift up that edge, glue it in place. And look, it's all coming together. Now we're going to work on the opposite side and hide all of those ugly edges so that it looks finished on this side. Sometimes it's helpful to use a scissor or even a paper clip if you want to secure this down while it dries, because sometimes it wants to pop up. I want to take a moment and talk about this second trim that I'm going to use. It's designed with just one beautiful edge, and that's this gold beading that you see. My objective is to hide the black part of it inside the collar before I put the backing on. So I'm going to go ahead and glue this down on the inside edge. I'm just laying my glue down with a little toothpick because I just prefer working with a toothpick because I control the glue better. I don't want to put too much glue and have it seep out the edges because that's not attractive. You can also use a popsicle stick for this if you find it easier. But the goal is to hide inside the collar this black part that you see and only see that metallic gold. Doesn't that look pretty? I think it makes all the difference when you take the time to put those little details into your projects. Instead of one layer, we did two. All you see from the front side is that little bit of gold. I ended up putting a little of the same trim on the ends as well. We all like closure. I mean, it feels good. So let me talk about 2 ways you can close your collar. One of them is with a ribbon, which I like a grosgrain ribbon. And when I say grosgrain, I mean that the grain pattern is the same on both sides. There's no bad side. And the other is the hook and eye closure. I'm choosing the hook and eye closure for my collar, but I'm going to show you how to quickly do the ribbon one if that's the one you choose. The ribbon's a little more limiting because you can't wear whatever tie you want with it, but it's still just as beautiful. First, you want to place your ribbon choice at the top edge of the collar. And this is all before you put your back piece on. You want to glue that down and let it dry for a while because this is going to really be holding your collar on. And you want to repeat that to the other side. And you decide how long you want your ribbon to be. Clearly, I like a long ribbon, but you can cut off the excess if you choose. I'm pretending that the glue is dry just for demonstration to show you that after everything's dry, you want to put your back piece on over that so that the ribbon is glued between the 2 layers. And then you can tie your collar on. Since I'm choosing the hook and eye closure, I'm going to go ahead and glue the back of my collar on. For larger areas, I find a popsicle stick very useful. And we just layer a piece over. I like to cut out my back piece a little bit larger than the front piece, just to allow myself enough space to get complete coverage, and then I can trim off the excess when it's all dry. While my collar looks beautiful as it is, it doesn't need embellishment. This all comes down to a matter of personal taste. I like a little light reflection now and again, so I'm going to just add a couple little tasteful beads into my collar design. It's all up to you, it's all up to your imagination and whatever inspires you. In true creative form, I left out one step, which is you're going to need some needle and thread if you want to do it the way I'm doing it, and that's using hook and eyes. Working with hook and eyes is not that difficult, but placement is key. You don't want to place your hook or your eye beyond the edge of your collar. You want to make sure it's right up to the edge and that the looped ends are pointing inward. If you place your hook and eye too far out, the fit will be off and your collar will be loose and you'll see the hook and eye. So the whole point is not to see the hook and eye. Time to sew. You want to begin by going underneath the hook and then pulling. Just keep repeating that. Just go into your fabric, under the loop, and then pull it through. And just keep doing that a bunch of times because you want it to really be tight and secure. And you do that on the other side too, the loop here. I like to do about a dozen passes through each loop. So that's 4 loops altogether. So that's 48 passes essentially to get a really secure stitch. I've secured both sides of my hook and eye, and now I'm going to show you how it all comes together. See how that fits together snug, and I don't see my hook and eye at all. All right, you caught me. I'm a bit of an overachiever and collars are addictive. Can't help it. Take some risks, you guys. Be creative and have your very own collar ID. If there's one thing I know for sure, and that is we are all here to inspire one another. So don't forget to tag me in all of your creations, and never forget, nothing's off limits when you're like-minded.